The stamp was 12 inches from the paper that could get the boy out of the moldy apartment. 12 inches. That was the distance between Malik Rawlins breathing through the night and Malik Rawlins coughing until morning. His father stood at window 2 with a hospital envelope bent at the corners, one hand flat on the counter, the other resting on his son's shoulder. The boy was 8 years old, maybe 9, wearing a gray hoodie with the sleeves pulled over his hands. He held a broken toy bus with one wheel missing. He was not crying, that made it worse. He was trying to be quiet in the way children learn to be quiet when adults with badges and computers decide whether their lives are urgent enough. Behind the glass, the clerk looked at the hospital discharge note, then the transfer approval, then the shelter exit letter, then the confirmation from Haven Court where a room was still waiting. The blue-handled stamp sat beside her keyboard. All she had to do was press it down. Ink, pressure, decision. Then Nolan Pierce stepped behind her and said, "Place the file on hold." The clerk froze. Darnell Rawlins blinked once. "My son has asthma," he said. "The hospital said we have to leave today." Pierce did not look at the child. "This office cannot compromise integrity because a situation is urgent." The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that means peace. The kind that means everyone heard the cruelty and everyone was calculating what it might cost to react. 27 people sat in the Marrowgate Housing Access Office with folders on their laps and deadlines in their mouths. A grandmother stopped rocking the toddler beside her. A woman near the vending machine lowered her phone. A man in a delivery jacket looked down at his own papers like they had suddenly become dangerous. Malik coughed into his sleeve. Once, then again, his father's hand tightened on his shoulder. "My child is not a compromise," Darnell said. Pierce finally looked at him. "Please lower your voice." That was how the office did it, not with shouting. Not with slammed doors. With words clean enough to survive a memo. Temporary hold. Enhanced verification. Residency confidence. Administrative disruption. SIG. Phrases that sounded neutral until they landed on a child who could not sleep in a room with mold climbing the window frame. At window 3, Laila Monroe watched the stamp remain untouched. She had come in with her own manila folder, her own emergency deadline, and a sealed envelope no one behind the counter knew existed. Her file had already been blocked under the same phrase Pierce liked to use when he wanted power to look like procedure, non-standard profile. Laila had heard those words before. She had heard them in eviction appeals, disability transfer denials, missing voucher cases, and late-night calls from people who had done everything right except live a life that fit neatly into a database. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse him. She only asked, "Please identify the written policy." Pierce smiled like the question itself was disorder. "Ma'am, this office is not obligated to debate internal risk controls at the counter. I am not asking for debate." "Then, what are you asking for?" "The rule." A small sound moved through the room. Someone exhaled. Someone whispered, "She knows the language." Pierce slid a pale yellow notice beneath the glass. Temporary denial, pending enhanced verification. No signature, no policy citation, no appeal window. Laila looked at the paper but did not touch it. The wall clock read 3:17 p.m. 28 minutes until her own emergency transfer expired. 28 minutes before 43 tenant case files could be left overnight in a leaking storage room. 28 minutes before the office could bury another decision inside a printer tray and call it process. Her phone vibrated inside her bag. A message from her daughter waited on the lock screen. "Mom, I saved you a seat in the front row." Laila did not answer. Across the lobby, Malik held up his broken toy bus and whispered to his father, "The number 14 goes near Haven Court." Darnell nodded, but his eyes stayed on the unstamped paper. Because Haven Court would not hold the room forever. Because asthma did not wait for business days. Because a child's lungs had just become less important than an internal label no one would put in writing. Pierce leaned closer to the glass. "Ms. Monroe, if you continue interrupting intake flow, I will classify this interaction as administrative disruption." Laila's hand moved to the canvas bag at her side. Inside, it was a cracked leather wallet, a phone with unanswered messages, her father's stopwatch, and a sealed court order Pierce had not known to fear. She looked at the yellow denial slip, then at the blue stamp, then at the boy with the broken bus. When a public office can deny help without showing the rule, is that procedure? Or is it power wearing a badge? And what happens when the woman they think is only waiting for assistance has actually been sent to measure the damage? 8 months earlier, Laila Monroe sat in the back booth of a 24-hour laundromat on Easley Road with a manila folder under her elbow, while dryer doors thumped in uneven rhythm and the smell of hot cotton filled the room. Her father's watch lay beside her coffee. It had stopped at 2:12 years before, on a Wednesday morning in late October, when the clasp caught on the rail of a city bus and the glass cracked across the face. Her father had never fixed it. He said some broken things still kept you aware of time. After he died, Laila kept it in her bag whenever she needed to remember what patience had cost him. That night, patience had numbers. Her checking account held $642. Rent was due in 9 days. Her father's remaining medical bill had been reduced from $19,000 to $4,800, but the payment plan still took $200 every month. Her car had 2 warning lights on the dashboard. Her legal consulting work paid in uneven pieces, usually 30 days late, sometimes 45. She had one daughter, Amara, who needed a winter coat before the school trip on the 17th. The laundromat dryer cost $2.25 per cycle, and Laila had already fed it 3 times because the machine nearest the window never dried sleeves properly. She read the same paragraph of the grant agreement 4 times. Her phone buzzed. "Mom," Amara had typed, "did you eat?" Laila looked at the half-empty coffee and the vending machine honey bun she had bought at 11:14 p.m. "Yes," she typed. It was the smallest lie of the night. Outside, a city bus sighed against the curb. A man stepped down with a cane in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. Laila watched him through the fogged window and felt the familiar pressure behind her ribs. The public version of her life was neat. Compliance consultant. Former deputy inspector. Woman who understood regulations well enough to make institutions nervous. She owned 2 good blazers, 1 pair of polished black shoes, and the kind of controlled voice that made people assume she had never cried in a parked car. The private version was receipts clipped together, calls returned after midnight, debt negotiated in careful tones, and a daughter who knew too early how to ask whether there was enough. The manila folder beneath her elbow contained the first outline of what would become the Marrowgate Access Equity Review. At the beginning, it was only a pattern. 6 tenants from the East District had called the same neighborhood legal clinic in 1 month. 4 had been black, 1 was Puerto Rican, 1 was Cambodian American. All 6 had been delayed by residency verification after presenting documents that should have satisfied the published standard. 2 lost emergency rental assistance. 1 moved into a cousin's living room with 3 children and 2 plastic bins. 1 elderly man missed the transfer deadline for an accessible unit because the office said his utility bill was too new. Each case alone could be dismissed as unfortunate. Together, they had a shape. Laila knew the shape. She had spent 11 years reading the distance between written rules and lived outcomes. Bias rarely announced itself. It hid in discretion. It hid in risk scoring. It hid in phrases like incomplete confidence, internal threshold, special review, administrative irregularity. It let everyone involved say their hands were clean because the system had made the decision. But systems did not stamp papers. People did. For 3 months, Laila gathered denial slips, intake notes, public records, appeal letters, queue logs, and screenshots sent by tenants who were tired enough to trust a stranger. She took calls at 6:30 in the morning before school drop-off. She reviewed documents at 1:15 a.m. after her daughter fell asleep. She skipped 2 dental appointments, stretched 1 grocery trip into 12 meals, and turned down a paid corporate audit worth $7,000 because it required a confidentiality clause that would have blocked her from investigating public housing access. She called the city's oversight office 9 times. She received 3 polite acknowledgments. She sent a summary memo with 18 attached examples. She received 1 automated response. Then a retired judge named Celeste Harrow called her on a Friday evening at 5:42. "Ms. Monroe," the judge said, "I have read your memo twice." Laila stood in the hallway outside her apartment with 1 shoe still in her hand. That usually means either a lawsuit or a meeting. The judge did not laugh. It means both are possible. But first, it means we need a record clean enough that no one can pretend it is emotion. 2 weeks later, a sealed order authorized a limited compliance review of the Marrowgate Housing Access Office. Not a takeover. Not a firing power, not a dramatic rescue. A review. The authority was narrow. Laila could observe intake conditions. She could request written policy. She could document inconsistent application. She could test whether published eligibility standards matched counter practice. She could trigger a 30-day compliance hold on discretionary administrative actions if she found evidence of systemic deviation. She could not dismiss staff. She could not approve every application herself. She could not override state eligibility law. She could not reveal the appointment until a triggering event occurred on site or a formal obstruction was documented. That last limit mattered. Power that had to stay hidden felt almost useless until the moment someone misused theirs. By the 5th month, the review had become something larger than a file. The neighborhood legal clinic joined, then a tenants association, then a small research team from Northbridge Community College, careful to remove names and addresses. By the 7th month, Laila had mapped 43 delayed cases across 4 service windows and 3 satellite offices. The average delay for standard applicants was 6 days. The average delay for applicants marked non-standard was 28 days. People with employer letters from large companies moved faster than people paid in cash. People with traditional leases moved faster than people renting rooms from relatives. People whose names appeared in older property databases moved faster than people displaced by demolition, family violence, eviction, or medical debt. The system called it confidence. Laila called it a filter. Still, she knew a report would not be enough. Reports could be shelved. Dashboards could be questioned. Community testimony could be praised and ignored. A lawyer could send a letter, and the office could reply with another letter, and the people waiting on vouchers would still be sleeping on sofas while language circled them like a fence. So Laila chose to appear in person. Not as a consultant, not with a press conference, not beside the judge. She applied for a legitimate emergency bridge transfer connected to a small nonprofit office space where her review team had temporarily stored tenant records after a pipe burst. The request was ordinary. The documents were complete. The deadline was real. If the office processed her file according to its published standard, she would sign the receipt, leave quietly, and add fairness to the report. If it did not, the counter would show itself. That was the test, not a trap. A test. There is a difference between catching someone and letting them demonstrate what they already do. The numbers were simple and brutal. Clock 1 belonged to the work. At 3:45 p.m., the emergency transfer authorization for the tenant records had to be stamped and transmitted to the temporary archive site. Without it, 43 active case files would remain in an unsecured storage room with a leaking ceiling until the next business day. One night of water damage could compromise affidavits, medical notes, lease copies, and appeal packets people had trusted her to protect. Clock 2 belonged to the public. At 5 p.m., the Marrowgate Board of Civic Services would open its quarterly live-stream hearing. The Access Equity Review was not listed by name, but a reserved agenda slot existed under Operational Performance Update. If Laila had clean on-site documentation before 4:30, Judge Harrow could authorize a preliminary summary for the public record. If not, the board would receive a softer memo, the kind officials thanked you for before doing nothing. Clock 3 belonged to home. At 6:30 p.m., Amara would stand on the small stage at West Bell Arts Center wearing a green dress Laila had hemmed by hand. It was not a competition. It was not a scholarship event. It was a middle school spoken word showcase with folding chairs and a microphone that popped on P sounds. But 3 weeks earlier, Amara had asked, very carefully, "Are you coming for the whole thing, or just the end?" Laila had said, "The whole thing." She had watched her daughter test the answer for weakness. Every lost minute pressed against one of those promises. At 3:16 p.m. in the Marrowgate Housing Access Office, the manila folder sat on the counter between Laila Monroe and Nolan Pierce. Her father's watch rested inside her bag, still stopped at 2:12. The yellow slip waited under the glass. 3:17 p.m. 28 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Laila did not touch the notice. She said, "Please identify the policy." On November 3rd, when Laila was 9 years old, her father took her to the county records annex because a clerk had written the wrong apartment number on their assistance renewal. It was a cold Saturday morning, the kind that made people keep their hands in their sleeves while waiting for buses. Laila remembered the exact hour because her father woke her before sunrise and said, "Come on, little bird." Offices open early when they want working people to miss them. He worked nights as a transit maintenance mechanic. His uniform was navy blue, with a stitched patch over the chest and a faint smell of diesel that never fully washed out. His hands were cracked at the knuckles. His eyes were red from a shift that had ended at 5:10 a.m. He had slept 40 minutes in a chair, changed shirts, packed 3 documents into a grocery bag, and brought Laila with him because there was no one else to watch her. The annex had a metal detector, brown tile floors, and a sign that said all visitors must wait to be called. A heater rattled behind the reception desk. Every time it kicked on, dust moved through the air like pale smoke. Her father held number 84. The red display on the wall showed number 61. Laila sat beside him for 2 hours and 18 minutes. She counted because counting made the boredom smaller. Her father did not complain. He took out the first document, unfolded it, smoothed the crease with his thumb, and read the line again, then the second, then the third. When they reached the counter, the clerk looked at the grocery bag before she looked at his face. "This is incomplete," she said. Her father placed the documents on the counter in order. Lease. Pay stub. Prior approval letter. The clerk sighed. "Sir, you need to understand, we cannot process confusion." Laila remembered the word confusion because her father went very still when he heard it. He had worked on hydraulic lift systems that could crush a hand if one bolt slipped. He could read wiring diagrams with 400 lines crossing in black ink. He could tell by sound when a bus engine would fail before the driver felt it. But at that counter, one wrong apartment number made him appear confused to someone who had not read the page. He did not argue. He did not call her rude. He did not tell her what he knew. He turned the first document around so she could see it. "Please read the address on line 2, he said. The clerk frowned. Then he turned the second. "Please read the address on line 4, then the third. Please read the agency stamp on the bottom." Each request was small. Each one forced the room to return to facts. Laila watched the clerk lose patience because patience was easier when she controlled the paper. Her father gave her nothing to punish, no raised voice, no insult, no begging, just document after document, line after line, until the error had nowhere left to hide. After 12 minutes, a supervisor came over. The clerk said, "He is challenging the intake determination." Her father said, "I am asking you to correct your office number." That was all, not your mistake, not your disrespect, not the way you looked at me, your office number. The supervisor read the documents. She stamped the renewal. The sound landed hard on the counter. Laila still remembered it. Ink, pressure, decision. Outside, her father bought her a paper cup of hot chocolate from a vending machine that gave too much water and not enough powder. He did not make a speech. He sat on the low wall by the bus stop, rubbed his thumb over his cracked watch glass, and said, "When a room wants you emotional, hand it a record." That was the lesson. Not silence as surrender. Silence as structure. Not politeness as weakness. Politeness as a way to keep the other person speaking long enough to reveal the rule they were actually using. Years later, Laila would understand the cost of that lesson. Her father had not been calm because he felt nothing. He was calm because the system had trained him that anger could become evidence against him faster than truth could become evidence for him. Today was the day that lesson came back with a manila folder, a stopped watch, and a counter that wanted her to react. 2:58 p.m. 47 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Laila entered the Marrowgate Housing Access Office through a glass door that dragged against the floor before shutting behind her. The lobby noise reached her in layers. A copier warming up. A child tapping plastic wheels against a chair leg. The soft electronic chime that called the next applicant to a service window. The walls were painted gray with blue trim. A row of framed community photographs showed smiling families holding keys in front of apartment doors. The photographs had no captions, no dates, no names. They looked less like proof of service than decoration for people who did not need service. Laila walked to the check-in kiosk. The screen asked for full name, last four of applicant identification, appointment type, and urgency level. She entered each field slowly. Her finger hovered over the urgency menu. Emergency bridge transfer. Same-day document stamp. Temporary archive relocation. A small green circle appeared. Proceed to window 3. At window 3, Maribel looked up. She was in her late 40s with tired eyes, neat braids, and a cardigan buttoned wrong at the top. A ceramic mug beside her keyboard said, "One more form," in fading red letters. She noticed Laila's folder first, then her face, then the sealed edge of the document packet. "Good afternoon," Mara said. "Good afternoon. You are here for the archive transfer stamp?" "Yes," Mara typed. The keyboard made a dry clicking sound. Her eyes moved across the screen, then stopped. Laila saw the stop. "Is there a problem?" Mara swallowed. "I am reviewing the file." A printer behind her station clicked awake. The institutional object of the room was not the glass or the badge or the metal detector. It was that printer. Every decision passed through it. Every denial sounded almost the same before anyone read the reason. Mara glanced over her shoulder toward a closed office door with frosted glass. Laila followed the glance. Nolan Pierce was inside, standing beside a filing cabinet, speaking into a desk phone. He wore his authority like a fitted coat. Not loud, not theatrical, just certain. When he saw Mara looking, he ended the call and stepped out. Mara turned back to Laila. "Your documents appear complete," she said quietly. Then she clicked something. A small amber label appeared in the top corner of the screen. Residency Confidence Review. Mara's hand moved toward the mouse again, then stopped. Pierce arrived before she could clear it. "Ms. Bell," he said, "why is this file in standard flow?" Mara's shoulders tightened. "The packet meets the published transfer requirements." Pierce looked at the screen. He did not lean close. He did not need to. He knew where to look. "This applicant requires enhanced review." Laila placed her hands at her sides. "On what basis?" Pierce turned to her with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Monroe. We have an internal risk control for non-standard documentation patterns. Which document triggered it? The file as a whole. That is not a document. It is an eligibility profile. 2 minutes earlier, a white man wearing a construction company jacket had left window 2, holding a stamped transfer receipt. Laila had noticed his packet was thinner than hers. 1 lease copy, 1 employer letter, 1 identification card. The clerk had smiled, stamped, and said, "You are all set." Now Pierce placed himself between Laila and Mara's screen. The visual anchor was his sleeve blocking the amber label. The sound cue was the printer behind them, still waking and sleeping in short bursts. The object detail was Mara's hand resting on a stamp she had not been allowed to use. The body language read was simple. Mara knew this was wrong before anyone said it. Pierce said, "This is Community Risk Review 9. Laila looked at him. "Please state the public name of that policy. Internal controls do not always have public names." "Then please state the written authority allowing you to apply it to an emergency archive transfer." Pierce's smile thinned. "You are asking for supervisory material at intake. I am asking for the rule being used to stop a same-day stamp. The rule is discretionary. Discretion still has scope." Mara looked down. Pierce noticed. "Ms. Bell, please place the file on hold." Mara did not move for 1 full second. Then she clicked. The amber label deepened. 3:06 p.m. 39 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. The chime called another applicant. Window 2. A woman in a navy church hat stood with an envelope pressed to her chest. She walked carefully, as if sudden motion could make the office notice her too much. At the public computer, a teenager whispered to his mother that their password had expired again. Near the vending machine, the man with the toy bus beside him kept watching the clock. Laila kept her eyes on Pierce. "Please provide the hold notice. The hold notice will print when review is complete." "When will review be complete?" "Standard timeline is 10 business days. This is a same-day emergency transfer, which is why the review is enhanced. Do you have a clause?" He folded his hands at his waist. "Ms. Monroe, this office has a duty to protect housing resources from improper access." That was his plausible argument. It was not absurd. Fraud existed. False documents existed. Emergency systems could be exploited. Public resources needed rules, and rules needed staff willing to enforce them. But his blind spot stood beside that argument like a locked door. He trusted the profile more than the person. He trusted an amber label more than complete documents. He trusted old patterns of stability, employer letters, formal leases, familiar addresses, and clean databases. Anyone whose life had been disrupted looked risky to him. Anyone whose paperwork carried survival instead of neatness became a problem to be contained. Laila said, "Please print the policy." Pierce said, "I can print the applicant notice. The policy? That is not available at the counter. Please call the supervisor with authority to release it. I am the intake director." "Then please identify the appeal path." "This is not yet appealable." "Because it is a hold, a temporary denial. You used both terms." His jaw moved. Mara's eyes lifted for a fraction of a second. Laila reached into her bag and took out a pen, not the sealed envelope, not the court appointment, just a black pen with a cracked cap. She wrote on the back of her appointment confirmation, 3:08 p.m. Pierce identifies action as both hold and temporary denial, no written policy provided. Pierce watched her write. "Are you recording this interaction? I am taking notes." "For what purpose?" "Accuracy. If you intend to challenge this office, there is a formal process. Please provide it." He looked toward the security guard, not as an order, not yet. Just a signal that the room should remember who controlled access to the door. The guard shifted again. Laila did not look away. Mara had the expression of someone standing near a stove and pretending not to smell smoke. 3:11 p.m. 34 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Pierce said, "Ms. Bell, show me the classification path." Mara hesitated. "Now, please." She turned her monitor slightly, probably intending for Pierce to see without exposing the screen to Laila. But the glass partition reflected enough. Laila saw colors. Green, amber, red. Not names at first, just categories. Standard residential verification. Alternate residency route. Enhanced confidence hold. Administrative irregularity. Then the rows shifted as Mara scrolled. The names were partly masked but not fully. Enough letters appeared to show patterns if you already knew what you were looking for. Laila saw zip codes from the East District. She saw employer field blank. She saw informal lease accepted by clinic. She saw applicant reported displacement. She saw address affidavit. She saw cash income. She saw temporary guardianship. She saw shelter exit letter, one after another, amber. Across the top of the queue, other files moved green. Employer verified. Property database match. Prior lease continuity. Corporate payroll. Laila did not need to read race on a screen. The office had found other ways to code vulnerability. The result was cleaner that way, easier to defend, harder to accuse. The category did not say black, it did not say immigrant, it did not say poor, it said confidence. What does bias become when it learns to speak in neutral fields? Mara saw Laila seeing it. Her lips parted. Then she closed them. Pierce snapped his fingers once, low, not loud enough for the waiting room to call it rude. "Turn the monitor back." Mara turned it. Laila wrote one more line. 3:12 p.m. Q view shows alternate residency route files disproportionately held in amber classification. Pierce said, "That is internal data." Laila said, "Then you should not expose it at the counter." His face changed. "Not much. Enough." The delivery jacket man stood again. "Sir," he said to Pierce this time, "my name is Darnell Rawlins. My transfer voucher expires today. My son cannot stay where we are tonight." The caseworker said, "You only need to stamp page 2. Pierce did not turn. "Mr. Rawlins, I asked you to wait. I have been waiting since 1:20. Mara's fingers twitched near the keyboard. Pierce said, "Your file has a separate classification issue." Darnell looked at his folder. "It is a hospital discharge transfer. They faxed it twice. That will be addressed in order. My son has asthma." The child beside him held the broken bus wheel in his palm like a coin. Laila's breath stopped, then returned. She looked at the wall clock. Clock 1 was losing minutes. Clock 2 was waiting behind it. Clock 3 was still far enough away to pretend it could survive. Her phone vibrated inside her bag. She did not reach for it. Then it vibrated again. Pierce said, "Ms. Monroe, I am going to ask you one final time to accept the temporary denial notice and allow the office to continue service." Laila said, "I will accept a notice that identifies policy, authority, appeal rights, and the action taken. That is not how intake works." "Then please show me where intake is allowed to work without those elements." He leaned closer to the glass. You are creating delay for everyone in this room." There it was. A sentence shaped like public pressure. Make the person asking for rights feel responsible for the line. Make the line look at her. Make the office disappear behind her question. The room responded the way rooms often do, not with cruelty, with fear. A woman looked away. A man checked a dead phone. The teenager at the computer lowered his eyes. Darnell Rawlins stayed standing, but his jaw tightened as if he knew the trap had just widened to include him. Laila's phone vibrated a third time. This time she looked. The message preview was from Amara. "Mom, I saved you a seat in the front row. Ms. Keene said families can come in at 6. Laila read it once, then again. Her thumb hovered over reply. "On my way later. Proud of you. Do not worry." Every option felt like a promise with a crack in it. She locked the screen without answering. A small pain moved through her jaw because she had pressed her teeth together too hard. Mara saw that too. Pierce slid a yellow notice beneath the glass. Temporary denial pending enhanced verification. Laila looked at the paper. The printer behind Mara fell silent. 3:17 p.m. 28 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Laila did not touch the notice. She said, "Please identify the policy." Darnell Rawlins stepped away from the row of plastic chairs like a man apologizing to the floor for needing space. His son followed close beside him, one hand tucked into the pocket of a gray hoodie, the other holding the broken toy bus. The boy could not have been more than 8. His breathing was quiet, but not easy. Every few seconds his shoulders lifted a little too high, then settled too slowly. Darnell placed a hospital envelope on the counter at window 2. The envelope was bent at one corner from being carried too long. "I am not asking for new housing," he said. "I am asking for the transfer stamp already approved." The clerk at window 2 was younger than Mara, with a plastic nameplate that read Tessa. She looked at the hospital envelope, then at the screen, then toward Pierce. Pierce stayed beside Laila, but his eyes moved. Tessa said, "Mr. Rawlins, your file is showing Access Integrity Review." Darnell shook his head. "No. The caseworker said that was cleared this morning. She sent the clearance twice." Tessa clicked. "The clearance is present, but the address history field is incomplete." Darnell opened the envelope with careful hands. Not angry hands, careful hands. The hands of a man who had learned that paper could be damaged faster than lives could be repaired. "This is the shelter exit letter." He placed it under the glass. "This is the hospital discharge note." Another page. "This is the asthma action plan." Another page. "This is the transfer approval." Another page. His son leaned against his leg and looked down at the toy bus. Tessa lowered her voice. "The system is still asking for a prior lease." Darnell stared at her. "We were in a shelter. I understand. There is no prior lease. The system requires one for standard verification. Then use the shelter letter. The alternate route is under review." Laila watched the words land. Alternate route, different label, same wall. Darnell looked at Pierce. "Sir, you heard her. The hospital said mold exposure is making him worse. We have to move before tonight." Pierce turned with the patience of someone who believed patience belonged only to him. "Mr. Rawlins, this office cannot compromise integrity because a situation is urgent. My child is not a compromise. No one said he was. You are treating him like one." Pierce's expression cooled. "Please lower your voice." Darnell stopped. The boy looked up. The room heard it, the way rooms hear when a person is invited to become the problem. Darnell took one breath through his nose. "I am asking you to stamp page 2. Tessa looked at the page. Laila could see the stamp on her desk. Blue handle, black base. The institutional object sat less than 12 inches from the paper it was supposed to mark. Darnell said, "We have a room ready at Haven Court. My sister is there waiting with his nebulizer. If we miss intake, they give it to the next family." His son tugged his sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, "the bus lady said I could sit by the window next time." Darnell looked down and softened for 1 second. "That is his thing," he said, "not to anyone in particular. City buses. He knows every route from here to Bell Street." The boy held up the broken toy. "This one is the number 14, he said. "It used to have a wheel." Laila felt the manila folder under her hand, felt the stopped watch inside her bag, felt the phone she had not answered. Darnell was not a symbol. He was a father trying to get a stamp before a room disappeared. The child was not a tragedy. He was a boy who liked buses and wanted a window seat. Pierce said, "Tessa, place the Rawlins file in temporary hold until residency confidence is complete." Tessa did not move. He said it again. "Temporary hold." She clicked. The printer woke. Darnell stared at the machine as if the sound itself had betrayed him. When a person watches the same door close on someone else, how long can silence still call itself strategy? 3:20 p.m. 25 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Laila looked at the wall clock. Clock 1. 25 minutes before the archive transfer stamp expired. If she intervened now, Pierce might obstruct her file entirely. The 43 case packets in the temporary storage room could sit under a leaking ceiling overnight. Ink could run, signatures could blur, medical details could become unreadable. People who had already given too much of themselves to paper could lose the evidence they had left. Clock 2, 1 hour and 40 minutes before the board livestream opened at 5 p.m. If she revealed authority too early, before Pierce documented the full pattern, the office could call it a single misunderstanding, a staff training issue, a stressful afternoon. The kind of phrase that turned harm into weather. Clock 3. 3 hours and 10 minutes before Amara stepped onto the stage. If Laila stayed, she might miss the opening poem. Then, the second. Then maybe her daughter standing under stage lights pretending not to search the room. A child could forgive many things, but some disappointments became architecture. Laila knew that. She had lived in houses built from absence, the hidden project, 7 months of work, 43 files, 9 formal affidavits, 3 clinic partners, 1 sealed order, 1 chance to show not only what the policy said, but what the counter did when no one powerful seemed to be watching. Darnell Rawlins. If she stayed silent, he might lose the room at Haven Court. His son might spend another night in the apartment with mold climbing the window frame. Maybe nothing catastrophic would happen tonight. Maybe the boy would only cough until morning. Systems loved that kind of maybe. It gave everyone room to sleep. Layla's thumb brushed the edge of her father's watch inside her bag. She remembered him turning the document around at the annex. "Please read the address on line 2. Not a speech. An action." Pierce was speaking again. "Mr. Rawlins, we cannot make exceptions based on emotional presentation." Darnell closed his eyes. Tessa looked like she might cry, which did not help anyone. Marrowgate opened her mouth. No sound came out. Laila almost chose silence. She could feel the plan demanding it. Wait, collect more. Let them print the denial. Let the board see the full chain. Let the record become undeniable. Her daughter's message sat unanswered on the locked screen. Her jaw ached. Her breath came shallow once, then steadied. She took the yellow slip from under the glass, folded it once, and placed it inside the manila folder. Then she turned to Darnell. "May I ask one question?" Darnell looked at her with exhausted caution. "If your transfer is stamped in the next 10 minutes, can you reach Haven Court before 4? "Yes." Laila nodded. Then she looked at Pierce. "Please process Mr. Rawlins under the published emergency medical transfer standard." Pierce stared at her. "That is not your determination to make. I am asking you to apply your written policy. You are interfering with another applicant file." "No." She turned slightly so the room could hear without her raising her voice. "I am witnessing the same discretionary hold applied to complete alternate residency documents under a different label." The room changed, not loudly, but people felt when a sentence named the shape of their fear. Pierce said, "Security." The guard near the metal detector straightened. 3:23 p.m. 22 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Laila remained still. Pierce lifted his chin. "Ms. Monroe is disrupting intake operations and soliciting confidential applicant information." Darnell said. "She did not solicit anything." Pierce held up a hand. "Sir, do not involve yourself further." A woman near the brochure rack pulled out her phone. Not high, not obvious, just chest level, angled toward the counter. The publicity mechanism began with one quiet decision by someone tired of watching things disappear unrecorded. Pierce saw the phone. "Recording is not permitted in restricted service areas," the woman said. "This is the public lobby." The guard took one step forward. Marrowgate whispered, "Mr. Pierce." He turned sharply. "Not now." 3:24 p.m. 21 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Pierce walked to Mara's station and typed his own credentials into the system. The screen reflected in his glasses. Green light, amber label, red border. He clicked once. Laila's file changed. Administrative disruption flag. He clicked again. Applicant access suspended. He clicked a third time. Temporary account freeze pending review. The printer began to run. One page, then another, then another. Each page sounded like a small verdict. Pierce said, Ms. Monroe, your access to same-day services has been suspended pending supervisory review for asking for policy, for interfering with intake flow and attempting to redirect staff action. Please identify the staff action I redirected. You instructed processing of another applicant. I requested application of a published standard. You are not authorized to interpret standards here. Laila wrote the phrase down. Not authorized to interpret standards here. Pierce looked at the guard. Please escort Miss Monroe to the seating area until review is complete. The guard hesitated. He was a large man with a soft face and a radio clipped too low on his belt. His eyes moved from Laila to Darnell's son, then back to Pierce. Pierce said, Now! The guard walked toward Laila. She did not move. 3:26 p.m. 19 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Her phone vibrated. Then again. Then again. 3 messages appeared on the screen. The first was from Naomi, the paralegal guarding the storage room. Water is coming through the ceiling again. Archive site says no stamp, no intake. We have 19 minutes. The second was from Judge Harrow. Board counsel moved the agenda slot earlier. Need clean trigger before 4:10 or we hold summary. The third was from Amara. Mom, Ms. Keene says performers should look at someone they love. You are coming, right? Laila read all 3. She did not answer. The guard stopped 2 feet away. Mom, he said quietly, please do not make this harder. Laila looked at him. I am not making it harder. Pierce said, this is your final opportunity to comply voluntarily. Darnell said, my son just needs the stamp. Pierce turned on him. Mr. Rawlins, if you continue, I will mark your file as applicant agitation and refer it for safety review. The boy stepped behind his father's leg. The woman recording whispered, Oh my God! Pierce pointed toward her phone. Security include unauthorized recording in the incident notes. The guard looked trapped. Mara Bell stood. Mr. Pierce, she said, the recording rule applies behind the partition, not the lobby. Silence. It was the first full sentence Mara had risked. Pierce looked at her as if she had stepped out of position on a stage. Sit down, Ms. Bell. She did, but her hands were shaking. 3:28 p.m. 17 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. A supervisor was called. Then another. Pierce spoke into the desk phone with his back partly turned, but his voice carried. Yes, I have a disruptive applicant challenging discretionary controls, possible unauthorized observation, possible data exposure. I have frozen access pending your review. He paused. No, not physical threat. Another pause. Procedural obstruction. He listened, then said, I understand. He hung up and faced the room. Until supervisory review is complete, Windows 2 and 3 are temporarily suspended. A collective sound rose from the waiting area. No one shouted. That was almost worse. It was the sound of people doing math in their heads. Bus schedules, childcare, work shifts, shelter deadlines, medication windows, all of them suddenly attached to one man's need to regain control. Pierce said, this delay is unfortunate but necessary to preserve service integrity. Laila looked at Darnell. His face had gone still. Not calm. Still. The stillness people enter when they realize the system does not have to say no quickly. It can simply keep them waiting until the world closes. His son coughed once into his sleeve. Then again, Tessa reached under her desk for a paper cup and filled it from a water dispenser. She slid it under the glass without asking permission. Pierce saw it. Do not process any further assistance on that file. It is water, Tessa said. He did not answer. 3:31 p.m. 14 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Laila's first clock was almost gone. Naomi sent another message. Ceiling tile just opened. We moved 2 boxes. Need authorization now. Judge Harrow sent another. If obstruction is documented, authority can activate. Confirm before 4. Amara sent a photograph. A front row chair with a handmade paper sign taped to it. Reserved for Mom. Laila's throat tightened. She locked the phone. The manila folder felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. Pierce placed a new notice under the glass. This one had more words. Account frozen pending administrative disruption review. Same-day services unavailable. Applicant must return after written determination. The lowest moment did not arrive like thunder. It arrived as office language on cheap paper. Clock 1 lost. Clock 2 weakened. Clock 3 beginning to crack. Pierce said, "Ms. Monroe, this office cannot permit individuals with non-standard profiles to pressure staff into bypassing risk procedure." The room held its breath. Not because the words were loud, because they were clean enough to survive a memo. Laila looked down at the notice. She stopped, looked once at the wall clock, then at Darnell's son holding the broken toy bus, then at Maribel's hands folded now, trembling in her lap. Her father's watch rested against her palm inside the bag. 2:12 forever. She opened the canvas bag. She removed the sealed envelope. She placed it on the counter. She did not speak. Then she opened the manila folder and turned the first document toward the glass. The document landed first. Not her voice, not an accusation, not a performance. Paper. Cream-colored, 2 pages, sealed at the bottom in dark blue ink, with the raised mark of the Marrowgate Civic Review Court pressed into the corner. Pierce looked at it through the glass and did not move. Laila turned the first page so the heading faced him. Limited Compliance Appointment and Observation Authority. Maribel stood slowly behind her station. The guard took one step back. The woman recording lowered her phone a little, not because she stopped recording, but because her arm had started shaking. Pierce read the first line, then the second. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Laila said nothing until his eyes reached the signature block. Then she spoke. This order was issued on February 6 at 9:30 a.m. by Judge Celeste Harrow under the Civic Services Integrity Review Act. Pierce blinked at the judge name. Laila continued. It appoints me as limited compliance observer for emergency access, residency verification, and discretionary hold practices in this office. Pierce reached toward the document. Laila did not pull it back. Read page 2. He did. The room stayed quiet enough to hear the copy machine warming behind the staff door. Laila said, "The scope is narrow. I cannot fire employees. I cannot approve applications outside law. I cannot override statutory eligibility. I cannot compel individual outcomes without documented deviation." Her voice was even. "But the order authorizes me to request written policy, record inconsistent application, document obstruction, and trigger a 30-day compliance hold if discretionary practices appear systemically misapplied." Pierce looked up. "You should have identified yourself." "No." She placed her finger on the third paragraph. "The order allows non-disclosed observation until a triggering obstruction occurs." His eyes moved back to the page. Laila said, "You created the trigger." Pierce straightened. "This is irregular." "Yes." His expression sharpened, as if the word gave him somewhere to stand. This office was not properly notified. The court notified the executive administrator on February 7 at 4:15 p.m. She turned another page. Receipt confirmed by administrative counsel on February 8 at 10:02 a.m. Mara covered her mouth with one hand. Pierce looked toward the closed office door, then toward the security guard, then back to Laila. "This is a sensitive service environment. You cannot simply walk in and manufacture a compliance event." Laila reached into the folder and placed the second document beside the first. The second document was thicker. White pages, gray tabs, a clipped cover sheet with the title Access Equity Preliminary Pattern Log. No dramatic color, no photographs, no emotional language, just rows, just dates, just outcomes. Laila said, "This is not about my file alone." Pierce looked at the report and exhaled through his nose. "You are misreading internal classifications. Then correct the record." He did not. 3:34 p.m. 11 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Laila turned the report to the first tab. Between August 12 and January 29, the review logged 43 emergency or time-sensitive applicants placed into alternate residency or enhanced confidence categories. She moved to the next line. 31 had documents that matched published standards. Next line. 27 were delayed beyond the stated service window. Next line. The average delay for standard verification was 6 business days. Next line. The average delay for alternate route applicants was 28 business days. Next line. Applicants with corporate payroll letters were cleared at more than 3 times the speed of applicants with cash income affidavits or shelter exit letters. She looked at Pierce. That is before today. Pierce said, classification is not denial. Laila turned a page. In 14 cases, temporary holds caused missed benefit deadlines, lost placements, or expired transfer windows. He said, correlation is not misconduct. No. She tapped the report once, but repeated discretionary deviation is evidence. The room stayed still. Laila continued. Case 6. Shelter exit letter rejected while employer letter accepted without secondary proof. Case 12. Utility bill deemed too recent despite published 30-day threshold being satisfied. Case 19. Address affidavit accepted at window 1 and rejected at window 3 on the same afternoon. Case 24. Medical transfer paused because prior lease history was unavailable after displacement. Case 37. Same language as today. Incomplete residency confidence. No policy citation. No appeal window. Pierce said, those cases are confidential, names are removed. You had no authority to obtain them. Applicants gave consent. Legal clinic records were voluntarily submitted. Public records filled the gaps. He leaned closer. This is a setup. Laila looked at him for one long second. I requested an ordinary stamp. Every escalation after that was yours. The sentence did not land like a shout. It landed like a door closing. Pierce glanced at the woman recording. This lobby cannot become a theater. Today is not the scandal, Laila said. Today is the timestamp. Marrowgate closed her eyes. Something in that sentence reached her before it reached anyone else. Pierce pointed at the report. You do not understand operational risk, Laila said. Then show the policy. He stopped. Laila said, you invoked Community Risk Review 9. You identified it as discretionary. You applied it to my complete emergency archive transfer. You applied a related hold to Mr. Rawlins while a medical transfer stamp sat on the desk. You froze my same-day services after I asked for policy. You suspended 2 service windows after a lobby recording began. Pierce looked at the yellow slips on the counter. For the first time, he seemed to see them not as tools but as footprints. Laila said, I asked you to follow written policy. You chose unwritten discretion. His face hardened. I protected the office. From what? He looked at Darnell, then at Laila, then at the recording phone. From risk. Laila nodded once, then let the record show who you considered risky. 3:36 p.m. 9 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. She turned to Mara. Ms. Bell. Mara looked up. Your station has authority to process emergency medical transfer stamps under the published standard. Mara did not answer. Laila said, please open the Public Policy Manual to Emergency Medical Transfer, page 42, subsection 4. Pierce said, Ms. Bell, do not. Laila did not raise her voice. Ms. Bell, this is not forgiveness. This is a task. Mara's face changed at the word task. Not absolution, not rescue. A task. She turned to her keyboard. Pierce said, I am instructing you to stop. Mara's hands hovered over the keys. The guard looked at Pierce, then at the court order, then at the child. No one moved for 3 seconds. Mara typed. The screen brightened. She clicked into the Public Policy Manual, Emergency Medical Transfer. Page 42, subsection 4. Her voice shook as she read. When an applicant presents a hospital discharge note, transfer approval, and temporary placement confirmation, prior lease history shall not be required if displacement documentation is supplied. Darnell closed his hand over his son's shoulder. Laila said, does Mr. Rawlins have those documents? Mayor opened his file. Hospital discharge note received. Transfer approval received. Temporary placement confirmation received. Shelter exit letter received. She swallowed. Yes. Pierce said, this must go through review. Laila turned the court order toward him. Under the published standard, review is not a precondition. Mara picked up the blue-handled stamp. Her hand shook so badly that Tessa reached over and steadied the paper without speaking. The stamp came down, once, hard. The sound seemed to move through every person in the room. Ink, pressure, decision. 3:38 p.m., 7 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. Tessa scanned the stamped page. Mara transmitted it to Haven Court. The machine beeped. She looked at the confirmation screen. Received. Darnell stared at the word as if it might vanish. How long? He asked. Mara said. It went through. He held still. Then he bent down to his son. We got the room. The boy looked at the broken bus in his hand. By the window. Darnell laughed once, but it broke halfway. Yes, by the window if they have one. Laila turned back to her own file. Ms. Bell, please process the emergency archive transfer under the published standard. Mara opened the file. Pierce said, that file is frozen. Laila said, the freeze was based on administrative disruption after a policy request. The court order identifies that as potential obstruction. Remove the discretionary freeze and print the transaction log. Mara looked at Pierce. He said nothing. Not consent. Not apology. Only silence, because the next words might become worse for him than the last ones. Mara removed the freeze. A red warning flashed. Supervisor override required. Laila said, who has override authority on site? Pierce did not answer. Mara whispered, he does. Laila looked at him. Please apply the published standard or state your refusal. Pierce stood behind the glass with his badge crooked now. For several seconds, he did nothing. The woman recording lifted her phone higher. A man near the public computers said softly, say it. Pierce looked at him with anger, then remembered the phone, the order, the report. He typed his credentials. The red warning cleared. Mara stamped Laila's archive transfer. 3:41 p.m. 4 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. She scanned it. The scanner dragged the page in slowly, too slowly, every mechanical sound stretching the room tighter. A confirmation line appeared. Temporary archive intake authorized. Laila's first clock had not been saved by comfort. It had been saved by 4 minutes. Her phone vibrated. Naomi, stamp received. We are moving the boxes now. Laila did not smile. She turned to Pierce. The compliance hold is now active. His head snapped up. You cannot suspend this office. I am not suspending this office. She placed the third page of the court order on the counter. I am activating a 30-day hold on discretionary residency classifications pending external review. Published eligibility standards remain in force. Emergency transfers continue. Discretionary holds require written policy citation, supervisor signature, and appeal notice. Pierce said, this will slow everything down. Laila said, selective speed was the problem. Mara flinched at the truth of it. Laila continued, the board will receive the trigger notice today. The audit packet will include the transaction logs, denial notices, classification path, and this lobby incident. Pierce said, you are destroying public trust. Laila looked around the room. No, I am documenting why people lost it. 3:43 p.m., 2 minutes until the emergency housing transfer deadline. The office had not transformed, the walls were still gray, the fluorescent lights still hummed, the printer still waited for the next command. But power had changed direction, and everyone could feel the draft. Staff who had avoided looking at Laila now looked at the counter, at the court order, at Pierce, at the yellow slips. Tessa wiped her palms on her pants and returned to window 2. Mara printed Darnell's receipt and folded it with both hands before sliding it beneath the glass. Darnell took it. He did not thank Laila first. He checked the address, he checked the time, he checked the confirmation number. Then he turned to his son. Come on, we have to catch the bus. The boy lifted the broken toy bus toward Laila. The number 14 goes near Haven Court, he said. Laila nodded. Then you know the way. He smiled, small and proud. That mattered more than gratitude. The woman recording spoke to someone on her phone now. I am sending it to the Tenants Association. Yes, the whole thing. No, she did not yell. That is the point. A second person had recorded from near the computers. A third had photographed the yellow slips. A fourth was already texting a community group chat called East Side Housing Watch. Publicity did not arrive as a news van. It arrived as proof refusing to stay private. Pierce stood behind the glass. His silence was not humility. It was calculation, with fewer exits. Mara printed the transaction log Laila had requested. Each page came out warm from the machine. She gathered them, aligned the edges, and placed them in the folder. Then she added something else. A small handwritten note. Laila did not read it at the counter. Mara said, there are older logs. Pierce turned. Ms. Bell. Mara looked at him and seemed, for the first time, older than her fear. I know where they are stored. The cost of the sentence showed immediately. Not in punishment yet, but in the way the staff behind her stopped pretending not to listen, in the way Pierce stared, in the way her job became less safe before anything official had happened. Laila said, "Preserve them. Do not remove anything. Do not copy confidential applicant material outside authorized channels. Send a preservation notice to counsel and the court clerk." Mara nodded. No forgiveness speech, no public praise, just a hard road back toward repair. 3:45 p.m. Deadline reached. The archive stamp had cleared. Clock 1 survived by seconds. Clock 2 was alive. Clock 3 was waiting. Laila gathered the court order, the pattern log, the yellow notices, her pen, and the manila folder. She slid her father's watch from the counter where she had placed it without realizing and returned it to her bag. The watch still read 2:12. For years, it had meant a lesson. Today, it felt like a warning. She stepped away from the glass. The guard lowered his eyes. Pierce said, "Ms. Monroe." She stopped but did not turn fully. He searched for a sentence that would not make the record worse. "This process is not over." Laila looked at the recording phone, then at the stamped receipt in Darnell's hand, then at Mara's shaking hands. "No," she said. It finally started. Her phone rang before she reached the door. "Judge Harrow," Laila answered. "Do we have the trigger?" the judge asked. "Yes." "Clean enough for board record?" "Yes." "Any immediate correction?" 2 transfer stamps processed under published policy, 1 discretionary hold activated, preservation notice needed. The judge was silent for half a beat. "Then go to your daughter." Laila closed her eyes. Clock 2. The hearing would open in 1 hour and 15 minutes. Judge Harrow could carry the packet into the record. Naomi had the archive receipt. Mara would send the logs. The Tenants Association had the recording. The machine would continue without Laila standing in front of it. Clock 3, a green dress, a front row chair, a sign taped with crooked letters. "Reserved for Mom." Laila pushed open the glass door. Outside, the air felt colder than it had when she entered. Darnell and his son were at the bus stop half a block away. The boy stood on his toes, watching for the number 14. Darnell held the stamped receipt like it was both paper and shelter. Laila's phone buzzed again. "Amara, are you close?" Laila looked once through the office window. Pierce had not moved. Mara was still at her desk, typing with both hands now. The printer started again. Laila answered her daughter. "I am on my way." 3 months later, Mara Bell kept a folded copy of the preservation notice in the side pocket of her work bag. She no longer worked at Window 3. That was not promotion. That was not punishment on paper either. Officially, she had been reassigned to document reconciliation during the review period. Unofficially, everyone understood that the office had moved her away from applicants because she had read the policy aloud when silence would have been safer. The first week after the lobby incident, she went home every night with a headache behind her right eye. Her pension had 14 years in it. Her sister depended on her for rent help twice a month. Her son was filling out community college forms, and Mara knew exactly how quickly a workplace could make a future smaller without writing the reason down. Still, she sent the logs, not to a group chat, not to the woman who recorded the video, not to Laila personally. She sent them through the authorized preservation channel with a signed statement saying that alternate residency files had been manually rerouted for at least 9 months. She identified 3 storage folders, 2 archived queues, and 19 transaction reports that had not been included in the office summary. The statement cost her. 2 coworkers stopped eating lunch with her. 1 supervisor told her that loyalty mattered in public service. Pierce passed her once in the hallway during the investigation and said nothing, which somehow felt more threatening than if he had. Mara did not become a hero. She had watched too long before speaking. She had clicked too many amber labels and let too many people walk away with yellow slips. Repair did not erase that. But every morning, before she opened a file, she placed her hand on the edge of her desk and read the first line of the public policy manual out loud. "Service standards apply before discretion." She read it softly, not for performance, for memory. Nolan Pierce received due process. That mattered. There was no mob firing, no midnight termination, no public official pretending a complex system had only one bad employee. The investigation lasted 74 days. He was interviewed 4 times. He was allowed counsel. He submitted a written defense arguing that his decisions were motivated by fraud prevention, operational risk, and protection of limited housing resources. Some of that argument was valid in theory. The review said so. Public programs did need verification. Emergency pathways could be abused. Staff could not ignore suspicious documents simply because a request sounded urgent. But the evidence showed something else. The logs confirmed that Pierce had expanded Community Risk Review 9 beyond its approved scope. The policy had been created for duplicate identity flags and conflicting government records, not for shelter exit letters, cash income affidavits, displacement documentation, or informal residency histories. The review found 43 affected files in the initial sample. Then the external auditors widened the search and found 112 more. 27 applicants had missed time-sensitive deadlines. 16 had lost a placement, voucher, or transfer window. 9 had later been approved after appeal using the same documents first rejected at intake. The language was careful. It did not call Pierce a villain. It called his conduct unauthorized discretionary expansion with disparate operational effect. That was enough. He was removed from intake authority. He was placed on unpaid administrative suspension for 30 days. At the final board meeting, after council reviewed the evidence, his employment was terminated for policy misuse, failure to provide appeal rights, and obstruction of a court-authorized compliance review. He did not apologize publicly. Maybe he never understood the difference between being blamed and being accountable. Maybe he understood it too late. Either way, for the first time in years, the office had to admit that procedure had been used not as a guardrail, but as a gate. Darnell Rawlins did reach Haven Court before 4 that day. The number 14 bus arrived late, but not too late. His son, Malik, got the window seat. The temporary room was small. 1 bed, 1 fold-out chair, 1 dresser with a drawer that stuck. The heater made a clicking sound at night. The hallway smelled faintly of soup from another family cooking with a plug-in pot they were not supposed to have. But the walls were dry. Within 2 weeks, Malik stopped waking up coughing 3 times a night. Within 6 weeks, Darnell had transferred his delivery route closer to the new address. He still worked long days. He still kept every document in a blue envelope because trust did not return just because 1 stamp finally landed. Malik repaired the toy bus with a bottle cap, tape, and a black marker. He did not send Laila a thank you card. He sent her a route map he had drawn himself, with Haven Court circled in green and the number 14 line running across the page like a promise that knew where it was going. Laila pinned it above her desk. The Marrowgate Housing Access Office changed because it was forced to change in numbers it could not soften. The 30-day compliance hold became a 90-day corrective plan. 6 service windows were retrained. 96 staff training hours were completed and recorded. 218 open files with alternate residency markers were manually reviewed. 84 holds were lifted. 31 appeal notices were issued retroactively. The average wait time for emergency medical transfer stamps dropped from 11 business days to 2. The denial rate for shelter exit documentation fell by 46% after the policy revision. 4 separate discretionary labels were retired. Every temporary denial notice had to include a policy citation, a supervisor name, and an appeal deadline. A quarterly external review was approved for 1 full year. 3 community organizations received direct reporting access for unresolved emergency cases. None of that fixed everything. A new form could still become an old wall. A retrained office could still grow tired. A policy could still be bent by someone convinced that bending it was protection. But for a while, the counter had to explain itself. That was not nothing. The lobby video traveled farther than anyone expected, not because it was loud, because it was quiet. People watched the part where Laila placed the court order on the counter without speaking. They watched Pierce call a child a risk without using those exact words. They watched Mara read the policy with her hands shaking. They watched the stamp come down. The Tenants Association posted a clipped version that reached 12,000 views by the next morning. By the end of the week, community pages, housing advocates, local law students, and neighborhood clergy had shared it more than 600 times. A regional journalist did not name it a scandal, she named it a pattern. Debt choice mattered. The board hearing transcript became public the following Monday. It showed the dates, the classifications, the delayed files, the limits of the court order, and the reason the compliance hold had been triggered. For once, the story did not depend only on emotion. It had receipts. Laila Monroe did not attend every hearing after that. She could not. She had work. She had debt. She had a daughter who had begun measuring promises more carefully than before. On the night of the spoken word showcase, Laila arrived 7 minutes before Amara stepped onto the stage. Not at the beginning, not for the whole thing. 7 minutes before. The chair with the paper sign was still there, but the tape had curled at one corner. Amara saw her mother sit down and held her face still, the way children do when they are deciding whether relief should be allowed to show. Afterward, Amara hugged her. Then she said, "You said the whole thing." Laila did not defend herself. She did not explain the court order. She did not talk about stamps, hearings, or emergencies. She said, "I broke that promise." Amara nodded once. Then she handed her mother the printed poem. The title was Front Row. Laila read it later in the car and cried without sound because some victory still arrived carrying a bill. 3 months later, the poem stayed folded inside the same manila folder that had held the court order. Her father's stopwatch stayed in the inner pocket of her bag. The yellow denial slip stayed in a clear sleeve, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how ordinary harm looked before anyone gave it a name. The archive files survived. The board record survived. Darnell and Malik got through the winter. Mara began the difficult work of telling the truth without asking to be praised for how late she found it. Pierce lost the authority he had mistaken for judgment. And Laila kept moving between rooms where people smiled at policy language and hoped no one asked what it did when it touched a life. Something changed that day. A father got a room for his son. An office had to open its files. A hidden review became a public record. A counter that had been trained to treat certain forms of survival as suspicious was forced to show its work. That is a victory. It deserves to be named. But the victory has a shadow. Laila won because she carried power in a bag. She had a court order, a pattern log, a judge waiting for confirmation, a legal clinic behind her, a tenants association ready to share proof, and enough institutional language to make the office answer in its own vocabulary. Most people at that counter had none of that. They had folders, they had bus fare, they had children waiting beside them. They had shifts they could not miss, and phones they could not keep charged, and documents folded so many times, the creases became part of the record. How many people had heard temporary hold and gone home because they did not know those words could be challenged? How many had lost rooms, medicine, transfers, hearings, jobs, or custody visits because a clerk would not stamp a page? How many had been told the system needed more confidence when the truth was already sitting under glass? Revenge can feel clean when the reveal is perfect. The paper lands. The room freezes. The person who abused discretion finally has to answer for it. But justice should not require a secret appointment. It should not require a recording phone. It should not require a daughter waiting in a front row chair while her mother proves that the rules are real. The hard question is not whether Laila Monroe won. She did. The hard question is why truth needed authority before anyone would read it. And until that changes, every counter with a silent printer, every office with an unwritten hold, every file marked non-standard because life did not happen neatly, is still asking the same question. Who gets believed before the stamp comes down?